If Iran does not meet the conditions, we will not hesitate to attack again. Will the Revolutionary Guards in Iran have a nuclear weapon in 60 days? Today we'll bring you the intelligence reports that exposes the gaps in the talks with Iran. The Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, avoided answering when he was asked whether Iran's missile program and proxies appear in the Memorandum of Understanding, and said that it is a general document. And meanwhile, in Iran, the commander of the Quds force is threatening, do not mess with the Islamic Resistance Front. And he's also added that Trump is afraid of them. And the $300 billion fund meant to incentivize Iran is causing an uproar in the United States. And Trump announces this is fake news. After Iran's attack on Israel last week, the Air Force prepared for a massive attack against Iran, which was stopped at the last moment. We will bring you all the details on that story. And in the Arab world, they're shocked by the agreement. They're saying, if Iran continues like this, someone will have to finish the job against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. And meanwhile, also on the soccer field, an unprecedented political drama is taking place behind the scenes of the Iranian national team's games. Fans of the Iranian team enter with the regime flag, and then in the middle, pull out the lion flag. Today, we will bring you how the Iranian protests conquered the World Cup. I'm Shoshani, and this evening, Yair Pinto is filming a new episode for the weekend, an episode I highly recommend you wait for, and it will go up this coming Friday. So today, I'm replacing him here on Boots on the Ground, and I'll bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel, and also the full truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is June 16th. Just a few hours after United States President Donald Trump announced that an agreement had been reached with Iran, the Iranian news agency Mehr published tonight, between Sunday and Monday, 14 items from that draft. I'll already say this. This is one of the least reliable news agencies in the entire world, and that's saying a lot. A propaganda hub of the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, but still, let's see what can be learned from this leak about the agreement. These are the main items, the main sections. First, a permanent and immediate halt to the war on all fronts, including in Lebanon. An American commitment not to interfere in Iran's internal affairs and to respect the sovereignty of the Islamic Republic. Full removal of the naval blockade within 30 days. An American commitment to withdraw its forces from Iran's surroundings. Reopening of the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days, according to an arrangement that Iran will determine. Suspension of sanctions on the sale of oil, petrochemical products, and their derivatives, and granting Iran full access to the financial revenues from them. The United States and its allies will be required to present plans for the reconstruction of Iran in the amount of at least $300 billion. A 60-day negotiation period in order to reach a final agreement, which will be based on the nuclear issue and on the full cancellation of the main and secondary sanctions of the United States, as well as the decisions of the UN Security Council and the Board of Governments of the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA. And of course, a repetition of Iran's commitment within the framework of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons not to produce nuclear weapons. In addition, during the negotiation period, the United States committed not to add forces to the region and not to impose new sanctions. Also, according to the report, the release of $24 billion of Iran's frozen funds during the 60 days of negotiations. Half of the amount will be made available to Iran even before the talks begin. In addition, a monitoring system will be established for the implementation of the agreement. The final agreement will be approved through a decision of the UN Security Council. And the final negotiations will not begin before the release of half of Iran's frozen funds, the suspension of sanctions on Iranian oil, and the removal of the naval blockade on Iran. Look, I hope that by Friday, we will already have full and clear information, and not only Iranian speculations and leaks. Because the slogan, Iran is still far from a bomb, which in recent years has become one of the most calming and most dangerous sentences spread here, is true only if we assume that the Iranians will not try to do exactly what they are most likely to do. That is exactly the trap. The difference between 60% and 90% enrichment sounds to the ear like 1/3 of the way. But in practice, according to the accepted professional calculations, anyone who holds material enriched to 60% has already completed almost the entire process. That's why enrichment to 60% is not civilian nuclear with an asterisk. It's a loaded gun on the table, only without anyone having pulled the trigger yet. And that's also why the sentence, Iran is still far from a bomb, has become in recent years one of the most calming and most dangerous sentences spread here. It is true only if you ignore the material. It is true only if you ignore the knowledge. And it is true only if you assume that the Iranians will do us a favor and will not try to do what every sober assessment must assume they will try to do. So could the Revolutionary Guards exploit the time in order to break out to a nuclear weapon? We'll try to understand this together. Behind the scenes of Trump's festive birthday, emergency talks, heavy pressure, and fears were taking place that the agreement with Iran would collapse at the last moment. Even senior officials in the White House were surprised by the president's announcement that the deal had been completed and believed that the details were still under negotiation. The Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, revealed in the last 24 hours additional details from the Memorandum of Understanding signed between Washington and Tehran. He clarified that one of the central sections in it deals with tight supervision of the Iranian nuclear program and the destruction of the highly enriched uranium stockpiles located on Iranian soil. Vance said that under the agreement, inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, will be allowed to return to operate in Iran. According to him, one of the central components of the framework is cooperation between the United States, the IAEA, and Iran for the purpose of destroying the stockpiles of enriched uranium in Tehran's possession. This issue is explained very clearly in the Memorandum of Understanding, Vance said. Look, the question now being asked in the Middle East is no longer whether a war will break out between Iran on one side and the United States and Israel on the other side, but who will decide to stop it on the Iranian side? And who inside Tehran has the authority to move the military from confrontation mode to political understanding? After more than 100 days of war and mutual escalation, Iran and the United States are moving closer to signing a Memorandum of Understanding in Geneva this coming Friday. After intensive mediation that began through Pakistan and then moved to Qatar, against the background of regional and international concerns over the expansion of the confrontation and the threat to energy security and freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf. It seemed that the expected understanding is not only a traditional political agreement, but an attempt to stop the consequences of a war that pushed the region to the edge of economic and security suffocation, especially with the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, the tightening of the American naval blockade on Iran's ports, and international concern over oil supply and global trade. But the negotiations themselves raised a much more complex question inside Iran. Who really has the power to decide on war or on peace agreements? We'll bring you all the answers later in this broadcast. And meanwhile, everyone is talking about the establishment of a fund for the reconstruction of Iran to the tune of $300 billion. According to the explanations in the United States, this fund, which is supposed to come mainly from the Gulf states, will be established only after Iran completely dismantles its nuclear program, fully stops its support for terror organizations, and carries out significant internal reforms. At the very same time, the United States President Donald Trump published tonight, between Monday and Tuesday, a firm statement on Truth Social. In that statement, he claimed that the reports about a $300 billion reconstruction fund for Iran are false, and declared that Iran agreed that it will never have nuclear weapons. And on the Lebanon front, the Hezbollah terrorist organization claims that it has stopped attacking Israel and that following the agreement, the IDF no longer has freedom of action. But in the United States, they're making it clear that Israel does not need to withdraw from Lebanon. Trump makes it clear that Iran will receive nothing before it meets its commitments, and at the same time, he's also looking towards Israel's northern front. A senior American official emphasizes that the IDF's withdrawal from southern Lebanon is not a condition for the agreement, and that Israel retains the full right to self-defense. And meanwhile, at the World Cup, fans of Iran's national team with a firm call to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Hours before the opening whistle for the match between Iran and New Zealand, it seemed that the real battle in the stands had nothing to do with soccer. At the center of attention were the lion and sun flags, the symbol identified with Iran before the Islamic Revolution of 1979, and with many of the opponents of the current regime in Tehran. Ahead of the tournament, FIFA banned the entry of certain flags and symbols identified with the Iranian opposition into the stadiums. But on the ground, the reality looked completely different. Many fans managed to enter the stadium while carrying, one way or another, the lion and sun symbol. For some, it appears on hats. For others, on shirts. For others, as a small symbol attached to clothing. And in some cases, even as an actual flag. Many in the Iranian crowd called on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to finish the job against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. I know the news right now feels a little like an endless loop, but hold on tight, because it seems the situation in the Middle East is bringing the entire world closer, either to world peace or to World War III. So we have a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. I'm Shoshani. Usually Yael Pinto is with me, but today I'm replacing him. We're boots on the ground, bringing you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and about the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click the subscribe button. And most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Mati Shoshani, and Yael Pinto on social media to get a look through our eyes at what it's like to live in Israel under war. So what is really behind this memorandum? What is the agenda that's pushing the United States and Iran to sign some kind of memorandum with the hopes of that leading to an agreement? Well, I'd say it's twofold. There's a unique circumstance here where both the U.S. and Iran now have, different perspectives, but a joint desire to have some kind of extended ceasefire, at the end of which there's some kind of agreement. For the Iranians, the goals are clear. They want to have a pause from the war. They want to rebuild their military stashes. They want to extract their ballistic missile silos that have been buried. They want to get some cash, and they need it quickly to pay salaries, to buy goods, etc. They urgently want to remove the naval blockade that has been choking both their economy and preventing exports of oils and other petroleum-based goods, but also preventing imports of food, of other derivatives that they need both to sustain the population and to feed their war machine. But it goes further than that. The Iranians need a win also politically speaking. They want to show their people that they outlasted the American armed forces, that they were able to withstand the pressure on them, survive to tell the story, and continue to rule Iran. The U.S. comes at this from a different perspective altogether. What do they need? They want an agreement, because Trump has been against publicly and in practice against forever wars. He needs to be able to show his people that he is able to end this war. That's an important note for President Trump and for his White House, but also for the Republican Party, who wants to make sure that they have some kind of substantial achievement on their belt or in the bank before the midterms come later this year. Let's talk about this agreement for 1 second and what's really behind the agenda that's pushing Iran, that has been a staunch, resistant of any kind of agreement long-term, and the U.S. that has been making threats for an extended season to come together finally in what seems like the first opportunity to really sign a memorandum that is expected to lead to a long-term agreement. Let's start with the interest and agenda of both countries. First of all, with the Iranians. The Iranians have a very, very detailed and complex need to have some kind of pause to the war and relief from the pressure that's placed on them. I need to explain the story here. Iran has been under severe financial sanctions for years now. They have been painful to them. The U.S. and others have frozen hundreds of billions of dollars of their assets, at least $100 billion in cash, probably including more that are frozen in other assets that make their life very, very difficult. You add to that the fact that the financial military blockade that the Americans are carrying out against Iran has choked them financially in two perspectives. It prevents them from exporting oil and petroleum-based products, from Iran outwards, which allows them to make money, but it also prevents them from importing goods. They can't import anything that they need for their industries. They can't import food goods. They can't import the chemical components or the other components that they need for their ballistic missiles or for manufacturing in the country. And think what you want about the Iranians. No economy, no matter how big or resilient it is fully resilient to this kind of blockade on them for goods. So it hurts them financially. They need the cash too. The agreement is supposed to release some cash to the Iranian regime. The exact number is unclear, but it's a good amount of cash. When that happens, the Iranian regime can pay salaries, can buy goods, can pay its proxies. It's cash that is much needed for them and by them. And that's an important note for them, as much as they like to play it off as something that's trivial or irrelevant to them. Also politically, the Iranians have a need and a desire to show a win, to show that they were able to resist to the United States, that they were able to sustain a threat against travel in the Strait of Hormuz. And those are true statements. They were able to resist. They were able to survive despite the substantial blows that they were dealt. And they were able to jeopardize travel in the Strait of Hormuz, at least to a certain degree, for an extended period of time. Much longer, I believe, than most people were imagining at this point. So for them, there's a bunch of interests that align in a desire to have some kind of agreement. Now, it gets interesting when you look at the U.S. perspective. The Trump administration needs an agreement. Why? Because they publicly stated that they won't drag the U.S. into another forever war, and they're planning to do exactly that. Two, the war is costing them in public perception, in support rates within the United States, or approval rates, as the Americans call it, within the United States, but also leading into the midterms. President Trump and his team want to make sure that this is not a weight on the neck of the Republican Party as it's going into the midterms. But beyond that, too, there's also a global aspect here. The United States wants to lower the price of oil. The United States wants to stabilize the prices of commodities, and those two things go through opening up the Strait of Hormuz. So in a bizarre turn of events, it seems that the U.S. and Iran are able to reach, at least initially, some kind of memorandum or initial agreement on the moving pieces. Now, I need to say this clearly. There are some really big pieces here that might not work. Will Iran really give up their nuclear plan? I don't know. I feel like they've learned a very painful lesson in observing the Ukraine, in observing Gaddafi, in observing Iraq, Saddam Hussein, in understanding that a country is much more resilient to external interference when they have a nuclear bomb. The best example of that is North Korea. The Kim family that have been controlling them in an iron fist and a nuclear fist, realistically, for decades. The reason they're still in power, and we need to be honest about this, is because they have nuclear capabilities, and people just don't think it's worthwhile to mess with them. Iran has taken note, they've learned a lesson, and they've said, we'll be better off if we have a nuclear bomb, even if it costs us dearly to try and get to that bomb. So will the Iranians give up their capabilities? I'm not sure. Will they stop funding proxies? I find it very hard to believe. Will they open the Strait of Hormuz? Will they, at least for now, stop with the acts of violence? Will they possibly give up the enriched material that they've been holding on to such a great degree for many years? That is possible. There is a middle ground that might actually work and bring some kind of rest to the region, specifically around Iran. From an Israeli perspective, that's not necessarily a perfect situation, but again, our needs and desires here are far more complex than just a black and white, yes agreement, no agreement. And here we're really talking about the alignment of interest between the United States and the Iranians. That's the key issue that we're dealing with here, the key thought pattern that we need to have. One last thing that we need to take into account is who the Iranians actually are. We've seen for decades that the Iranians are willing and, well, they say that they will, and they do, burn down the club, burn down the house, burn down everything around them, watch the world burn if it promotes their agenda. And they've done so time and time again. They're willing to kill their own people, to harm them, to do whatever is needed only to hold on to power. And when you deal with them, sometimes the agreement you have is the best agreement. And that's really the reality that's bringing together Iran, together with the United States, to the negotiation table, hopefully to sign a deal late this week. What will happen after that, we don't know. But even if the Strait of Hormuz opens, even if we remove some of the nuclear material from Iran, that in itself is a win, both for the U.S. and for the Iranians, sadly. And Israel looks on from the side and says, sometimes this is the best you can have. We'll continue to be resilient. We'll continue to be strong. We'll continue to be vigilant about the Iranians. But sometimes this kind of agreement is the best agreement you get. As missiles once again fall across Israel from Iran, Hezbollah, and other enemies, many people are asking how they can stand with Israel in a meaningful way. The answer is simple. Help us rebuild. We invite you to take part in something real, something rooted in the land and in the heart. The Rebuild Israel campaign continues, bringing life back to Israel's north. Along Israel's northern border, an area marked by war, by displacement and loss, we're planting an apple orchard, not as a symbol for a single moment, but as part of a long-term commitment to restore what was damaged and strengthen Israel's future. At a time when Israel is under attack, planting trees is a powerful declaration. We are still here. We are building, we are growing, and we are not leaving. God promised this land to the people of Israel, and together we can help it flourish once again. This orchard is more than agriculture. It creates jobs for local families. It helps communities return and rebuild. And it sends a clear message to the people of Israel: you are not alone. When you donate, you are not just giving, you're rebuilding. Your support puts trees in the ground, restores livelihoods, and transforms land scarred by war into land that grows again. This is how renewal takes root. This is how Israel rebuilds after war. Stand with Israel today, plant hope, restore the North, strengthen the future. Go to tbn.org/rebuildisrael or call now, 800-804-7895. Rebuild the land, restore hope, bless the future. Let's get back to the news. 1 hour before takeoff, while the pilots were already inside the briefings, the Israeli Air Force stopped a broad strike wave deep inside Iran. According to the commander of the Israeli Air Force, Major General Omer Tishler, the aircraft were already prepared to strike hundreds of targets in the heart of Iran. The weapons were loaded, the planning was finalized, the alert time had been shortened, and then came the halt. This is the big question here. Did the agreement with Iran truly stop a war, or did it only stop Israel moments before it was about to deepen it? The story begins with a strike in the Dakhya in Beirut. Israel hit a Hezbollah stronghold. Iran responded by launching dozens of surface-to-surface missiles towards Israel. The aerial defense array intercepted all relevant threats, and there were no casualties in Israel. But the IDF did not settle for defense. Within hours, the IDF Air Force launched an attack about 1,500 kilometers from home. Dozens of targets in Iran were struck. Components of the Iranian air defense array were hit, along with additional targets connected to the regime. And then the very next day came the heavier moment. The entire Air Force prepared for a much broader strike wave. Hundreds of targets in the heart of Iran were already on the table. And just 1 hour before departure, the operation was stopped. This is not a technical detail. It's a strategic snapshot. On the one side, Israel proves that it can reach anywhere in Iran with flexibility and with power. On the other side, the political leadership stops at the last moment while Washington is trying to close a memorandum of understanding with Tehran. Here's the gap. On the ground, the aircraft are ready. In the closed rooms, diplomats are trying to create a pause. And in the middle stands the question no one can escape. What's happening with the Iranian nuclear program? The emerging memorandum is being presented as a ceasefire, the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and the start of 60 days of negotiations. But experts and intelligence officials warn that the real headline is not peace. The real headline is just time. Iran holds quantities of enriched material that deeply concern those who know the details. According to the estimates presented, the material at higher levels could be enough, sufficient even, after further enrichment for about 12 and a half to more bombs. About 11 bombs for material enriched to 60%, and another bomb and a half or more for material enriched to 20%. Those numbers sound technical, but they're the heart of the matter. The difference between 60% enrichment and 90% is not like climbing ordinary stairs. Whoever has already reached 60% of enrichment has completed most of the hard part. That's why this kind of material is not a footnote. It is the core of the threat. The problem is not only the material. The problem is also the monitoring. Since February of 2021, there has been no continuous monitoring of the production of centrifuges and other enrichment components. Before the war, more than 21,000 centrifuges were installed at two monitored sites. But what has been built since then, what has been hidden, and what has been prepared as backup? That's a much broader question. That's why the sentence, "if they restart, we will know," isn't enough. Iran is a huge country with mountains, with deserts, with cities, tunnels, underground bases, industrial complexes, and revolutionary guards who know how to operate in hiding. A small and well-hidden underground activity can be much harder to detect than a large and known facility. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, has also warned in the past that Iran holds enough knowledge, material, and equipment to try to secretly establish a small facility and advance from there. That is exactly why Israel is now focusing on one simple question. Where is the material? Not where is the statement, or what is the statement, not where the ceremony is taking place, not where the photo op is. Where is the uranium that's enriched to 60%? Where is the material that's enriched to 20%? Who has access to it? Who is inspecting it? And is it even under Iranian control or leaving Iranian control? Or is it only becoming a topic for future discussion? At the top of the American system, not everyone is calm. CIA Director John Ratcliffe warned President Trump that intelligence information raises serious doubt about Iran's willingness to make real nuclear concessions. Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth also expressed concerns in internal discussions. On the other side, J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner pushed to advance the understandings. Vance says the inspectors will return to Iran. He says the United States will help Iran destroy a stockpile of enriched uranium. But he also admitted that the document is relatively general and that a large part of the practical details will only be discussed in the next stage. This is where the danger really begins. Because if dismantlement is postponed, monitoring is postponed, and money starts moving before the material is removed, Iran is not losing time. It's gaining it. That brings us to the money question. A $300 billion reconstruction fund for Iran has become a political storm in the United States. Trump claims it's fake news. Those close to him explain that it's not a grant, but conditional incentive. In other words, not money that is now sitting on the table, but a future possibility for investment only if Iran dismantles its nuclear program, stops supporting terrorist organizations, and carries out internal reforms. But in the Middle East, even a conditional incentive sounds different when the other side is a regime that is known and knows how to drag out time. A senior American official said they will not pay Iran for a photo op or for opening straits. That is an important sentence. The question is whether it will become a real red line. The United Arab Emirates also entered the picture. According to reports, the Emirates agreed to provide billions of dollars as part of an arrangement with Iran after weeks of Iranian attacks against it. The numbers around the arrangement range from $10 billion, $3 billion of which have already been made available, to broader estimates of about $20 billion. In return, Iran is supposed to stop attacking the Emirates with missiles and drones and begin a process of restoring ties, including intelligence sharing and economic cooperation. In other words, some Gulf states are trying to buy stability, but they also know that trust in Iran is incredibly low. Amjad Taha, an analyst from the United Arab Emirates, said it directly. He said he trusts the Iranian regime about as much as he trusts a crocodile to babysit children. That's not only a sharp joke, it's a regional perception. The Gulf wants quiet, but it does not believe Tehran has changed. Guys, if you want to understand what is really happening here in Israel and across the Middle East, make sure you follow Boots on the Ground, like this video, and subscribe right now. Because in moments like this, the details matter. The truth matters. You don't want to miss what comes next. And now we need to move to north, to Lebanon, because that is where the agreement is being tested on the ground. Hezbollah claims it has stopped attacking Israel since the announcement of the agreement. A source in the organization said no operations were carried out against Israel, but in the same breath, he emphasized that the IDF will not have freedom of action in Lebanon. That's exactly the kind of sentence that reveals the problem. Hezbollah wants quiet when it suits it, but it does not want to give it up its ability to threaten. In southern Lebanon, security sources report a significant drop in the pace of attacks. Israeli activity also decreased, although limited operations were recorded, including artillery fire and drone activity. At the same time, local councils in southern Lebanon called on residents not to rush back to the villages because of the destruction, the danger, and the aerial surveillance. According to Lebanese figures, since March 2nd, about 3,800 people have been killed in Lebanon, and about 1.2 million have been displaced from their homes. These are heavy numbers, but the truth must be said. Hezbollah turned villages, homes, and civilian routes into part of its combat system. When a terrorist organization builds infrastructure inside a population, civilians pay the price. In Israel, the basic principle is being made clear. There is no change. Defense Minister Israel Katz said the IDF will not withdraw from the security zones in southern Lebanon, Syria, or Gaza, as long as there is a need to protect the borders and the communities. Prime Minister Netanyahu said Iran wanted Israel to withdraw from the buffer zone in Lebanon, and that did not happen. Washington also tried to clarify, an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon is not a condition of the agreement with Iran. If Hezbollah attacks, Israel has the right to defend itself and respond. Trump himself said that he hopes to solve the situation in Lebanon as well, and that they need to talk with Hezbollah. That statement raises eyebrows in Israel, because here, people know very well the difference between talking with a terrorist organization and dismantling its capabilities. While the leaders speak, the Iranian street tells another story. In the match between Iran's national team and New Zealand, Iranian fans in exile tried to bring in the lion and sun flag, the historic symbol of Iran before the 1979 revolution. There were boos during the anthem. Israeli flags were also seen in the stands. And after the equalizing goal, an Iranian player celebrated with a shooting gesture towards the crowd, sparking outrage among the opponents of the regime. That is a small detail, but it matters, because the struggle against the Iranian regime is not taking place only in nuclear facilities, in airfields, and negotiation rooms. It's also taking place in the stands, online, through symbols, and in the regime's fear of one image reaching television screens inside Iran. And inside all of it, there's also heavy background noise on the American side. A B-52 bomber crashed after takeoff from the Edwards Air Force Base in California, and all 8 people on board were killed. This was a test flight, not an operational event against Iran, but as a reminder that behind the words American power, there are systems, crews, modernization programs, and real risks. The overall picture is sharp. Israel has shown the ability to strike deep inside Iran. The United States is trying to stop the war through a memorandum. Iran is trying to turn the pause into time, money, and breathing room. And Hezbollah is testing whether it can freeze Israel without dismantling its weapons. This agreement will not be measured on the day of the signing, but on the day they need to check whether the nuclear material is still in Iranian hands, whether Hezbollah is still building force, and whether the Strait of Hormuz is truly open without a new form of extortion. The distance between a strike wave stopped 1 hour before takeoff and a war that resumes can be very short. Will the next 60 days push Iran farther away from the bomb will prove that the timer received was its most dangerous weapon. So keep spreading the truth, follow us. Most importantly, don't forget to click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned in to the truth in real time and never miss boots on the ground. Keep looking for us, Mati Shoshani and Yair Pinto, on social media to see life in Israel through our eyes. Now let us pray for the people of Israel. Let's pray for our soldiers, both men and women in uniform, across the various borders, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, those working on the Iranian file and case, even those working on the Halted cases. Pray for supernatural wisdom for our Prime Minister Netanyahu, and for the U.S. President Donald Trump, who are fighting a war against the greatest evil of our lifetime, the Iranian regime. Guys, be blessed, and we'll see you all the next time. Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.